If I had a hammer, I'd a hammer in the morning, I'd a hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd a hammer out danger, I'd a hammer out warning, I'd a hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. Ooh, if I had a bell, I'd a ring it in the morning, I'd a ring it in the evening, all over this land.
Thank you. And if you're watching us Tuesday, March 6th, and you're watching us live, and today we're going to be talking about gun control, the pros and cons of it. And we have a very thoughtful psychologist with us, Stephan Tobin. Thank you so much for coming, Dr.
You're
Tobin.
welcome. You're welcome, Caleb.
And this is an important issue, and Dr. Tobin said that he was willing to discuss it, so I'm glad here. I mean, the tragedies that we see unfolding every month, and the feeling of hopelessness. You're a psychologist. I would imagine that you also deal with people feeling hopeless about things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a very difficult situation.
It also seems like every we go chugging on, and there's horror show after horror show, and kids and families and so on just feel so helpless to deal with this thing.
And we don't realize it. It's not really publicized, but the aftermath of people that were not injured but were present.
Yes.
The trauma that they feel, probably for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I was mentioning earlier, I was evaluating a person today who was suffering from PTSD. When he was 17 years of age, he saw his best friend take out a gun and shoot himself in the head. And he was in a room of 7 people, but it really affects him now. I mean, really strong PTSD symptoms. There are like there are $2.8 billion per year in hospital costs for those wounded in these battles, and that doesn't take into account the psychic, the emotional harm as well.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. If you were in a car and you hit someone, the person injured would have some way to be paid, or at least hospital bills, but not if they're shot on a street.
Yeah, and it is, there are people that see this as a health issue, but the CDC cannot do any research on the health cost to the nation about this unfettered availability of guns.
In 1996, a guy named Jay Dickey, representative from Arkansas, started a measure went through forbidding the CDC, Center for Disease Control, to spend money to either advocate for gun control or promote it. And that really squelched all CDC information. You're right. By law, they cannot investigate this very, very important thing. It's like we had a ravening lion in our neighborhood and eating people like crazy, but we've refused to study it. Absolutely, I agree with you about that.
Yeah.
But you know, we're talking earlier too about the donations that the NRA gives to various politicians, and how it influences politicians, and they can also say, you are not in our camp. You're mentioning that John McCain is given the most amount of money by these.
$7 million, and Trump $21 million. But what I've read is an even greater effect is that so many members of the NRA are become very, very excited and contact their Congress people whenever there's any kind of talk about gun control. And NRA is very good at scaring the hell out of these people.
Yeah. Yep. And they're also very good at scaring families, scaring schools, scaring communities in general, just making life so miserable. I think to myself too, if I was in a inner city area where there were gunshots or something, I would have to think once or twice if I'm going to go to the grocery store at night or let my kids go to the park or something like that. It's just that's an unsupportable tax on our behavior. It just really makes us, you know, harder to do things. It's kind of like wading in sand. You just can't. You're not free. Fear just makes you not free.
And now some of those kids from that school who have appeared on TV talked about their fears about going to school now. Boy,
those kids, David Hogg and Emma and so on too, what terrific kids they are.
Yeah.
I mean, really focused. I have a listing of all the people that were killed in the Parkland shooting. It's just, I mean, pretty kids, smart kids, teachers, and so on too. Here's a football coach who gave his life protecting another student by throwing his body in the way. But you know, it's ridiculous that school kids have to go through this. That schools have to think about being hardened. Tom Hartman was talking about a bill that something like $2.7 billion being suggested as security for schools. Governor Scott said what he's proposing is $500 million to keep schools safe, but nothing about reducing armaments, nothing about reducing automatic weaponry and so on. Jeez, I love it when in public places, the kids, for instance, they tried to have Scott come and listen to them. Scott refuses. But, you know, I love the kids. It's like the emperor has no clothes. These kids don't know enough to be afraid of the NRA. They can say, hey, what you're saying is just ridiculous and cruel. So,
you know, I'm also aware of how other countries where it's very, very difficult to, like Japan, it's very difficult to get a license to carry a gun. They have to go through months. But even in places where there are a lot of guns, like Canada, that people can get guns to go hunting, but they don't have the kinds of incidents that we have here. And of course, Australia in 1996, where they banned semi-automatic weapons, and they had, I don't know, like 300,000 guns that were turned in.
Yes, yes.
And they paid them for that. Now, that kind of measure, I don't think would work here in this country, because we have something like 20 million people or less live in the country of Australia. So it's a much smaller country. We have over 300 million in the United States.
Yes.
And over 300 million guns.
Yes.
So and we're not a homogeneous country. People in the cities tend to be more liberal and more anti-gun, whereas people in the country, in rural areas, are more pro-gun. So I think we would have to deal with this in a piecemeal way. It wouldn't happen all at once. And I think people that are afraid about having their guns taken away, they need to be addressed. Their concerns, their fears need to be addressed.
I agree. Yeah, Tasmania is where that occurred.
That's
Port
right.
Arthur killing,
That's
and
right.
I just looked at 35 people killed and I don't know, over 100 wounded, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then after that, no mass shootings in Australia. That went through the whole country, and you're right, and yeah, maybe what worked in Australia can't work here, but there's some common sense things I think we can agree on. And one of the things is a limited amount of bullets in your magazine.
Right.
And the idea that someone has a 15-round magazine, it's absolutely crazy in terms of life and so on. For self-defense, if you had a pistol and a revolver or something like that, you don't need 15 shots for self-protection, I think. But you know, people want to shoot off a lot of rounds. I think we can intrude on their right to shoot off 20 or 200 rounds at a time. For instance, the person in Las Vegas, right, that shot the crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, this guy though, the kid, you know, shooting those people there, the 17 kids killed them. I guess when a round hits you in this kind of a bullet, it doesn't just go through you. It knocks organs out. The people who are investigating the bodies later on were saying this is just horrible stuff. It's not but you know, NRA would say our right is absolute. You know, no one can stop us from owning what we want, and that's clearly not the even Scalia said, hey, the right of guns is not it's not untrammeled. It's not uncontrollable. That is, you can't control the kind of guns.
Right.
I hate to agree with Scalia about any damn thing, but on this, and Warren Burger said that too. But Scalia, geez, who'd have thought he could say something so smart?
Well, the Second Amendment clearly doesn't apply. Then they had muskets, You put in one bullet at a time.
Right.
How long did it take to reload?
90 seconds was fast.
Yeah, 90 seconds. And they were talking about militia, and I've been reading a book about Alexander Hamilton. Things were very, very different in those days.
Yeah.
The Hamilton and Jefferson were enemies. Jefferson was certain that Hamilton was going to try to create a monarchy. And so he wanted to be able to combat Hamilton and keep that from happening. And Hamilton, of course, hated Jefferson. They hated each other. There was an awful lot of stuff that was said about each other that was completely untrue. It was really scandalous. So I can understand in those days, we didn't have an army for the whole country. Each state had its own militia, and so there was some need for that. There's no need for it now.
Well, Tom Hartman points out that a lot of the early police forces in the South were part of the slave patrol. And so the guns were given to the whites there so that they could keep African Americans under control. He's got a great point. You know, give me liberty or give me death. That guy was a large slave owner in West Virginia, I think. But anyway, he helped write into the Constitution the 3/5 compromise. They just wanted the blacks to be under control. They wanted to have their guns. And and so in slavery, a lot of it too, the keeping African Americans down was a large part of the early slave patrols. So,
see, the facts clearly support that we are very dangerous in this country. That guns don't make people safer. Actually, they make people unsafe. Somebody that has a gun in their home, kids can get a hold of it, which is often the case. People commit suicide using a gun, and oftentimes it's an impulsive kind of thing.
Yes.
And there's an awful lot of shooting of women by abusive husbands, abusive boyfriends. A tremendous amount of that.
Yeah.
So there are clearly measures that we can take that actually a majority of the NRA members support.
Yes. Yeah, NRA members, most of them support background checks. It goes up to 80%.
Universal background checks.
But it's just the NRA leaders don't, and then they can gin up the few rabid people, you know, who would fail a saliva test. I mean, just to hammer at representatives and so on, you know, and pretend that they have the will of the people in their mind. They don't. But yeah, most NRA members are for kind of reasonable, you know, once again, the size of the magazines. Other things you can do is you can limit the number of guns you can buy in the course of a year. California's done that quite effectively. Another thing that should be done too is straw purchases. You know what straw purchases are?
Yeah.
Yeah, you buy a lot of guns and you offload them in Arizona or something, and then no one tracks you. You swear when you enter the store, this is for my own use. Yeah, the 500 guns, that's right. Then when you leave the parking lot, no one's going to hold you to using it for yourself, so you unload them and make the world a lot less safe. You know, in terms of the suicide thing, I was looking at a statistic tonight too. One study said that in a house with a handgun, there's a 4.8 times increase in suicide just as a result of having the handgun in the house. I sure believe it. Yeah, it's so easy, and as you're saying too, it's a spontaneous, sudden thing, suicide.
But the people, the fanatics, are really scared. They are not aware of the facts. I had a client who he watched Fox News all the time. Oh no,
poor guy. Oh,
and
turn off the
his fear, and this was when Obama was president. His fear was that the federal government was going to come over the hill and take his guns away and put him in a concentration camp. And that's the kind of fear that is promoted. So these people's fear, and they don't read the facts, they don't read the kind of statistics that we're aware of. And so they need to be addressed somehow. Their fears need to be taken into account.
Well, the Fox thing is, let me just say who we are. We are live, and we have Progressive Radio and TV, and tonight's show is gun control pros and cons of that. Give a call if you want to. Our number here is 503-650-0198, 503-650-0198 for comments, questions, observations. What do you think of the NRA? What do you think of the shootings that are so prevalent today?
I welcome discussion.
You know, Ed Markey, you know, Massachusetts senator, he proposed a bill that would spend $10 million that would investigate, once again, the shooting stuff. One of the things that the NRA has done so well is if we don't have the data, no one can get mad at us. You know, it's not our fault. We can't look at crazy stuff.
There actually is plenty of data, though.
And, well, California also on its own is capturing a large part of it. But the CDC apparently cannot coordinate between states. But, you know, a state the size of California can certainly keep its own data. And California tends not to be too right-wing. I mean, as Stephen Colbert says, of course, facts have a liberal bias, I'm afraid. Yeah. So the more data, the better. One of the, let's see, what was I going to say? President Trump, right, signed in February 28, a bill that rolled back Obama-era regulations saying that if you're on mental health reasons for Social Security disability, it made it harder for you to purchase a gun. But thank God he rolled it back. So he says, yeah, if you're crazy, you can buy a gun. That's so reassuring.
Oh,
this is sarcasm. Let me just explain. This is sarcasm. It's not a good thing.
No. And it's interesting because after the shooting in Parkland, so many right-wing politicians said, oh, the problem is that we don't address mental health sufficiently. And actually, people that are psychotic have a lower incidence of violence than people who don't, are not psychotic or mentally disturbed.
Yeah, they're more likely to be victims than other folks too. I mean, poor people just trying to navigate the world.
Right.
But I don't think we should necessarily make everyone have a gun if they, you know, have some mental instability. 7 times if the United States compared to higher income nations, if you're American, you are 7 times more likely to be violently killed, 25 times more to be likely to be violently killed by a gun. It's 6 times more likely to be accidentally killed with a gun, 8 times more likely to commit suicide using a gun than other countries, 10 times more likely to die from a firearm death overall. And we think guns keep us safe? I don't think so. Yeah. Oh my God. More than 2/3 of the homicides in the U.S. are firearms suicide. And yeah, I was looking at the statistics too that look at the death of women with men with guns. Oh my God. I just think that's atrocious. You know, other things in terms of, you mentioned that in Canada and other places, they have pretty much control of the guns and so on too. At least when you buy a gun, it's pretty tightly controlled. I was looking at a list of the steps that you have to go through to get a gun. I think in Russia, for instance, if you want a gun, there are about 8 different steps, very, very hard to go through. And finally, when you do get a gun, they only give you 50 rounds of ammunition. So the nice thing that we do, too, is to control ammunition in guns.
Yeah, I saw a show some time ago about in Japan how difficult it is to get a gun there. There was an American who tried to get a gun. It took him months to go through all these steps. And then that was for hunting. Yeah.
I guess it must be hunting in Japan. Yeah, I don't know. They have wildlife and so on, too.
Yeah.
David Hemingway. I wrote down a lot of statistics. David Hemingway, he's Harvard University School of Public Health, director of Harvard Injury, looked at differences, he says, in overall suicide. This is interesting. Right, across cities, states, and regions in the United States are best explained by differences in availability of firearms. I mean, it's like if you have a firearm next to you, it so much increases your the probability of your killing yourself or killing someone else. Many suicides are impulsive, and the urge to die fades away quickly. Firearms are swift and lethal means of suicide with a high fatality rate. And there was a lot of other statistics, too, about that. You said you never owned a firearm, or? Okay. Yeah, I've owned some handguns, but I've disassembled them. I mean, I've taken them apart, and it's just, the world is not as crazy or as violent as Fox News would have us believe.
Right. Yeah, they foment fear.
Yeah, and they ramp it up.
People are afraid, and And I think I read statistics or something that shows that people that have guns are actually more afraid of what's going on in the world.
People that watch Fox are a lot more afraid, as you say, and they carefully nurture that. The army's coming up from the south. ISIS is coming up through Mexico and the gates of Mexico and so on too. Everyone is ratcheted up to a higher level of paranoia. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the bumper sticker that says, if you're really scared, turn off the voices on Fox or something, switch the channel. But absolutely correct. Yeah, it turns out that are you familiar with some of the early research, conservative mind versus liberal mind? And it turns out you can predict who's going to be really conservative at 5 years of age because these are the frightened people. And liberals, really true, are not as nearly afraid at 5 years of age. But at a really young age, you can spot clear differences in them. I'm a little
concerned about what you're saying about liberals and non-liberals.
Okay, extreme. I'm talking.
Yeah, a lot of people, I'm very liberal politically myself, but I think that people who are conservative, and there are some good ones out there, like David Brooks. I think he's a terrific guy. I really like him a lot.
He's not the worst, but he cannot point the blame at a certain person that the blame should be pointed at. He
doesn't like Trump.
Yeah, well, but even today he's been pointing the problems at liberals. So so I'm not real fond of Brooks. But anyway,
I think it's important to understand their point of view. You don't have to agree with it, but at least to understand what their issues are, what their fears are. And obviously, they are afraid that if they don't have their guns, that they're going to be destroyed.
Ever read a book by Chris Mooney called The Republican Mind?
No.
Okay. It is a terrific book. But one of the things he points out is that conservatives, and if you're an extreme conservative or extreme Republican, if you're looking at ambiguous pictures, you tend to see awful things in them, threatening things a lot more than liberals. Liberals can look at a picture of vomit and not have too much of a reaction to it. And but if you're right wing, you tend to see threatening things in the pictures. And so the world that they see is not the world that I see, not the world that you see. But anyway, it's a terrific book, the Republican Brain by Chris Mooney. And also, if you look on Wikipedia, there's also research of just sort of the genetic or some of the differences in brain in terms of threat sensitivity. I'm not crazy, but anyway, but my wife says you shouldn't say bad things about people. Yeah. So thank you, Jane Thomas. Thank you, Jane Thomas. I'm trying to think of good things, yes? Yeah.
Well, I like David Brooks. I like a lot of things that he says. I'm more liberal than he is, but they have a point of view, some of them, Brad Stevens, who's now a commentator journalist for
the New York Times.
The New York Times. Yeah, I like a lot of things he has to say.
Another one. Douthat, D-O-U-T-H-O-T. He's another, the triumvirate of but when you're reading the newspaper, did you ever look at letters to the editor that people responding to Brooks and so on too? Did you ever do that? No. It's if you look on Kindle, you'll see the articles themselves, and then if you go to the middle, it says replies, and if you go to personal choices, I found that those are just wonderful letters, rejoinder letters. I mean, wonderful. I could spend my time just reading that, thinking, why the heck didn't I write that? I mean, I'm just so envious of a guy named Socrates. Gemley is another one, and a variety of other people. McMurrow is another one, but just wonderful writers. And how could they, know ahead of time what I want to think? But anyway, we're here for guns. Let me just say once again, we are here, and this is March 6th. Funny, huh? Not so funny. This shooting happened last Valentine's Day. I mean, February 14th? And Valentine's Day, the shooting took place. This young man was trained by the NRA. At about I think in eighth grade, he kind of joined it, and he went through this.
The guy who did the shooting?
Yes. Yeah, he was,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but initially, he went through the NRA shooting thing, and with a program, so he learned all about guns and how easy it is to shoot people. and on his materials.
They don't advertise that.
No, and also, also in his materials, he drew a bunch of swastikas on the magazines that he was caught with. They don't mention that either. Well, anyway, guns. That's kind of crazy. Yeah. My father, when he was a plantation manager at one point, he was on an island. Well, we lived on Oahu, which is one of the Hawaiian islands there. At one point, the tide went out, and Dad knew that this was a tidal wave coming in. So he took his shotgun out, and he forced everyone to come in off the shore. I mean, he was doing good thing getting them off, because indeed, tidal wave came back in, and anyone out there on the coast would have been ripped apart. So good for Frank, but he was very careful with guns, didn't use them.
I saw Condoleezza Rice. She was interviewed by Fareed Zakaria, whom I watch every Sunday.
I like Fareed. Mm-hmm.
And she made a good point. She's in favor of the Second Amendment. I don't think she's in favor of unfettered, unregulated.
Yeah.
But she said that when she was a kid, she lived in Birmingham, Alabama, and her father had a gun along with other people in that black neighborhood, and she said that night riders would go around, and her father and the other fathers would shoot their guns in the air, letting the night riders know that they were equipped. She said that the police wouldn't do anything. So I can understand why some people feel like they need guns for self-protection.
Part of that, I'm sure, I mean, just thinking about it, one of the things that it also does is it allows neighbors to know that, hey, there are bad people out here. Let's be careful. And so you're kind of, e pluribus unum, you all kind of join together in a common cause. For that kind of situation, I have no problem with guns. But in general, it turns out that New York City, for instance, is a heck of a lot safer than rural communities, especially now with the gun violence going down. It's incredibly safe. If you listen to Fox, I'm sure that they portray bodies, strewn on streets to umpteenth degree. One of the problems with Chicago, Illinois, for instance, is that Illinois is right close to Indiana. Chicago has very tight gun control laws. Indiana has none. So a lot of people in Indiana buy guns and then drive to Chicago and disgorge them, sell them to the highest bidder. And now, you have so many black kids also getting shot.
And shooting each other.
Yes, but the black leaders want there to be a restriction on guns. They know what's happening. They know that so many kids are dying unnecessarily, and so many police officers also have this sort of reaction to youngsters with guns, understandably. But I don't want any more shot. And clearly, Chicago ought to be able, and Illinois ought to be able to control the guns that come into its borders. But the NRA doesn't want that. NRA, according to the research, they make money no matter what. All they want is a gun sold, because the manufacturers will make money no matter what. I just find that incredible.
And they can't be sued either. The gun companies.
Yep. You're absolutely right. And
which is ridiculous.
Unfortunately, much as I like Bernie Sanders too, I think that's one of the things that he helped prevent, was being able to sue gun manufacturers. Bernie, not so good.
Let's talk about some of the measures that we could take.
Okay.
Because I believe that it should be an incremental approach.
Okay.
And I would say that the first thing is to ban semi-automatic weapons, like AR-15. I think that's something that would not be too difficult to achieve.
Well, no, I don't know, maybe not ban them, but cause them not to be sold anymore.
Well, I think people, do what they did in Australia. Have the government buy them back and destroy them. So I think that would be the first thing. I think the second thing would be to ban these magazines with many different, bullets in them.
You bet.
So I think that's another thing that wouldn't be too hard to put forth. Universal background checks. That's another thing that I think should be done.
The other countries you mentioned, they really tightly do that. I mean, they examine people very, very carefully.
And that you can't just go into a store and buy a gun and leave with it right. Even states that have a 3-day waiting list, it should be, I think, like a month. It should be harder to buy a gun to get a license to drive a car.
By far, I agree.
So I think that's another thing that should be done. A decent period of having to wait before getting a license to shoot a gun. I think people should be required to get a certain amount of training. It's ridiculous that soldiers, and I read that article, one of the articles that you gave me, by this Army officer who talked about the extremely rigorous training that soldiers have to get before they can fire a gun, and how they have to have them locked up. And any soldier that manages to lose a gun, he's going to be in big trouble.
Right.
And the whole base gets locked down.
Yeah, I was impressed by that. Yeah.
So we should have laws at least as strict as the Army. So I think that's another thing that could be done.
No, I absolutely agree with that. That really impressed me too. That McChrystal, the general in Afghanistan too, said that we shouldn't let weapons of war on our streets, and these automatic weapons, AR-15 and AK-47, are weapons of war. Let's not. These are military people that see the effect, the impact of these weapons on civilians and so on too.
There's no reason why a person needs that kind of a gun. You can't hunt with it. It's illegal to hunt. I don't like the idea of shooting animals anyway, but that's, I'm willing to accept the fact that some people like to go out and go hunting. I certainly am okay about fishing, killing fish, but not, I wouldn't want to shoot a deer.
There are limits. There are generally limits to how many bullets you can put in a gun to shoot deer, and how many shotgun shells you can put in your shotgun to shoot ducks. It's maybe 7 for deer and 3 or 4 for ducks, and you can't do it anymore. But if this Cruz kid, Nicholas Cruz in Florida, he had a lot more than 7. He had a lot more than 3. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I've heard people say, "Oh, you can kill somebody with a knife." Yeah, but you probably can't kill 17 people with a knife. Yeah.
Tom Hartman talks about the fellow that got really angry and went to school and started slashing kids with a machete. And I think that he harmed about 6 or 7 of them, didn't kill one, but gee, what he could do with an AR-15 or an automatic pistol. People say automatic. You don't know what an automatic or semi. Yeah, automatic is semi-automatic, whatever the heck it is. So it drives me crazy when people sort of say, "Well, you don't understand handguns, and so therefore you know nothing."
So I think if we started with those kinds of measures, it would take time, because it's true that some people would still manage to get a hold of AR-15s. Some people would still be able to get a hold of automatic revolvers. But over time, it would take time. We Americans are too short-term oriented.
I agree with you.
We want some kind of quick fix. Yep. But if we did that, over time, we would, I think, reduce the amount of violence in this country. People would begin to feel safer, so that they would begin to feel like they don't have to have a gun.
The more that we have these shootings, the more that people are afraid, the more the NRA can sell guns, and it's just an endless cycle. And Fox, have you seen it turns out, as you're saying, when Obama was president, a lot of gun sales, Now that Trump is president, fewer gun sales, because Fox is not saying, "Hey, he's going to take your gun away." I hope he does take people's guns, but anyway. But it's just, boy, they're so fickle. I mean, it just drives me, too bad. And another thing too, in terms of your list of things, I would be fine with forcing people to buy no more than 1 gun a month.
Yes.
I mean, gee whiz.
Yeah. Why does somebody need more than 1 gun a month? They're going to be, like in the Wild West, holding 2 guns and shooting.
Yeah. One of the arguments against just giving everyone guns to fend off people in mass killings are. One of the things I read is mass shooting is nothing like you expect. In the Pulse nightclub, for instance, in Florida, you had one person in the dark shooting at a lot of other people, and Trump said, well, if there was just someone there with a gun, he would have stopped. Nonsense. It's a crowd of people. It was the fellow who was in the theater, was it in, I forgot, not Arizona, Colorado or something. But yeah, remember, all dressed up with his, he was a bona fide nut, this fellow. But yeah, the idea that you're going to have in a crowded theater someone with a handgun skillfully disable or shoot a shooter is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, or even in school with teacher.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, yeah, a lot of kids.
I think what would happen is a teacher would accidentally shoot a lot of students.
Yes.
And then one teacher made the point that if she had a gun and the police came rushing in,
yes.
they wouldn't know that she's not the person that's shooting people. They would shoot her.
Yeah, with a gun, yeah.
Or him, if it's a male teacher.
Yeah, especially male teacher, yeah, male teacher with a gun. No, too late. No, it's, the whole thing is stupid. Let's run, you know, this is one of the things that we should try tests on it. We should see the feasibility studies, and it would instantly show itself to be incredibly ridiculous.
We can use the experience of other countries.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the military too. What would the military? I was interested in you know, shootings in military schools. You know, I didn't see any shootings in military schools because they don't let people there with guns. You know that.
Well, there was a major in Texas at a military base.
Shot the psychiatrist.
Well, he shot a number of people. Yeah, the psychiatrist shot a number of people. Somehow his gun wasn't locked up. And that's another thing, is that a lot of kids get a hold of guns because their parents don't lock them up. And as I pointed out earlier, in the military, you have to keep your weapon locked up. And I think, was that kid in, where was it, Troutdale or Sandy that shot some kid? And the guns in his house were just lying under they were under a bed. I
think his brother was in the military or something like that. He had a relative who was in the military. Recently,
you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Incident?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And yeah, I've talked to people at the schools too that recall that. There was a kid in the. This sounds really ridiculous. Several days ago, this 11-year-old kid is doing research on how to be the biggest mass murderer ever. So he goes home and he shoots his dad to death with his dad's gun, and then he goes to school and he starts shooting. Gun jams, thank God, and he's tackled. But I mean, you know, the notoriety, right? You have people, the Fox, you know, this sort of stuff, and you know, we tally points, and I don't look at stuff on YouTube that idolizes this sort of stuff. It's creepy and it's bad and so on too. But I would imagine there are a lot of kids who think, oh, if I could do this, gee, I'd be terrific. I don't know, but
kids that are like the Columbine kids.
Yes.
Where they felt like outsiders.
Yep.
They were bullied.
Yep.
You know, and that was their way to get revenge.
Yeah. I mean, the thought process is, I don't know what goes into that sort of stuff, but they did think that, and I guess they were bullied and they were outsiders and so on too, but oh, that gives me license to shoot a lot of people.
Well, they got revenge. They revenged themselves.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed nobody's calling in here.
No.
I'd like some pro-gun people to call in.
Probably they're staying away, hopefully. Anyway, yeah, give a call if you are pro-gun, or if you'd like to comment. Our number here is 503.
Or anti-gun, yeah.
0198, or anti-gun, yeah.
Yeah, say it again. I interrupted you there.
503-650-0198. Yes, call. Tom Hartman says, too, that a lot of the gun shootings are actually suicide. So you're going to do it. It's a suicide thing. You shoot a lot of people, and you expect to die, or you're going to kill yourself as well. I think Tom Hartman's right about that. Death by gun, death by suicide. But we think of it as a killing, but actually one of the major motivations for that is suicide.
Yeah, I've heard that sometimes people that shoot at the police are wanting to be killed.
Death by cop. Yeah, and a lot of people do it even with no bullets in the gun.
Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. Pretty common. Yeah.
But I have a drink of water here.
Okay. So we also have a model for regulating guns, and that turns out to be automobiles. You know, we regulate automobiles, we license them, we track them through. It takes licensing, training, and so on too, in order to drive a car. And you know, you're saying that it's easy to get a gun. It should be as hard as getting a car, driving a car.
Should be harder, I think.
Yep, with insurance and so on too. It's it's been spectacularly effective in reducing reducing the death rate per 100 million miles driven by 95% since 1921. So it really has driven it way down. In cars too, you also have stoplights now. You have stop signs and so on. But we really try and reduce the deaths by.
Oh, there are a couple of other. That reminds me, a couple of other measures that I read about. One of them is to have like a safety lock, where.
Yes.
And related to that is that they've actually had this in the past, where you have some kind of a password that you have to put in, or like recognizing maybe your thumbprint, like on my iPhone. You know, that has to be used so that somebody else can't use your gun.
An alternative,
a kid or some other person.
Alternative to that too is a watch or a ring that activates the machine itself. 3 years ago, Chris Hayes was doing this show. It was a Philadelphia gun dealer, and he was trying to these are smart guns, trying to sell smart guns.
That's right, yeah.
And the NRA says, no, we don't want that. You can't sell a smart gun. And so his shop was pretty much closed down. Even though I would think that I have a right to have any kind of gun I want if I wanted it. And if I want a smart gun, who the hell, can tell me no? Especially as one that could save lives and so on too. But the NRA is not focusing on that. When they need to, they employ the knuckle draggers. Apologies to knuckle draggers everywhere. But I mean, but the smart gun. What is wrong with having the smart gun? Logically, saves lives. It reduces harm. And yet, people against that? Only one reason: profit motive or greed or something, right? Yeah, no, you're right. You're right about the smart gun.
Well, it would cost the gun manufacturers more money, I guess. But the same thing with automobiles. That was anytime a new safety measure has been proposed, the automobile companies were against it because it would cost them more money. Like seatbelts.
Exactly correct. A lot of them still want to get rid of seatbelts. Yeah. I mean,
right?
Oh yeah, and also the airbags and so on too. I mean, the construction. It turns. I like Tom Hartman, but he mentions time and again that corporate interests have always fought back against safety measures, regulations that protect people. Trump talks about rolling back regulations. Regulations are protections. Climate and so on too. These are protections. Yeah, no, I agree with you about the safety measures and guns. Tom Hartman asks regularly, what have the Republicans done in the last 30 years that have helped the average person? Can you think of something that Republicans have proposed and passed in the last 30 years that have helped the average person? No. It's really hard. But Democrats are doing it all the darn time. It's at least trying to, as far as I can see. But it's... yeah, Dodd-Frank to make sure that people's fortunes aren't ripped away from them, that the pension funds are kept safe and so on too. But even now, the Republicans are trying to take away the Dodd-Frank's provisions, and we have several Democrats as well, like Tester, who's sort of on board with that, rolling back the regulations.
Well, those are Democrats from states like West Virginia.
Yeah. I think he's Wyoming.
Joe Manchin.
Yeah.
Tester, where's he from? Montana?
Montana, I think, or Wyoming. Montana. I'm one of those two states. Yeah. But it's crazy. They're trying to get along. Those states are so large, but the population is so small. I mean, the population is far smaller than Rhode Island, but they still have the same number of
senators.
Senators.
Yeah. Well, that's a separate issue, Caleb.
Yeah. Probably not going to settle that tonight. Yeah. So guns. Okay, we're back to Parkland School. We're going to be in another shootout before too long. The NRA is still going to intimidate other people, but this has a different flavor to it. It really does.
Yeah, I think that what those kids did, I think, was amazing.
Yeah,
incredible.
Some words of truth. We will outlive you, they say, yeah. And their logic is really good. David Hogg, for instance, I guess his father is a FBI retired agent.
One of the kids.
Yeah, he's got a tie on, he's all the kid with a tie. But yeah, very, very, but they're all so
And they said that
skilled.
the ones that were on Bill Maher's show, they said that their fathers have guns.
Yeah.
So they're not against all guns. They're not, but they're against AR-15s.
Yeah.
And
David Hogg was one of the people on the show, the Bill Maher show. Yeah. But yeah, his father, as I say, was an FBI person familiar with guns. In Hawaii, where I'm from, there's a lot of very tight regulations around guns. Guns are, it's hard to have a pistol, and you can have a gun for hunting, a rifle or something. But yeah, there are not many gun deaths in Hawaii as a result of their tight laws.
Oh, you're from Hawaii,
Yeah.
you're saying? Oh.
Yeah, born and raised there.
Oahu?
Yep. Yeah, we moved here in '83. Oregon is Oregon has guns, but I don't see it as being too wild westy here, thank gosh.
Well, it's a liberal state in general, but a lot of Roseburg, after they were very much against any kind of gun control after the shooting there, which kind of surprised me. You'd think that they would realize that there was a big sale of guns after the shooting there.
Yes, and once again, it proves that with every shooting, the NRA makes money, you know, and they love, if it bleeds, they make money, so they're happy making money with that. The sheriff also was very, very critical of Obama and at that time, but yeah, I find that incredible. Once again, living, making money off of blood. I mean, the kids bleeding. That's just crazy. It is funny how, you know, we have little mottos, little mantras, right? People do. You know, some of the ones on taxes. You know, you're not going to hurt the job creators, and so on too. So let's give the rich, you know, untold sums of money, and it's going to help all of us. Well, that's stupid. I mean, they don't create jobs. It's a demand of the middle class and lower classes that spend their money to create jobs. But this one too, Charlton Heston, remember, you know, you're going to take my gun away by prying it away from my cold, dead hands. Oh yeah, great.
Yeah, that's right. He was head of the NRA, wasn't he?
No, but he was a big spokesman for it. He might have been titularly the head of it. And but yeah, it sounds great, and people are going to defend themselves, they think. They also think that they can defend themselves against an intrusive government. There's no way, as Thom Hartmann says, anyone is going to defend oneself against tanks, helicopters, and so on.
Yeah, it's funny.
But also, Thom Hartmann goes into the history of the Second Amendment. There's nowhere in there does it say it's to defend us against the government. There's no way in there. That was written in later by Republicans and by NRA members, supporters who are just trying to fake facts, as it were, in the history. And they're really good with fake facts. I mean, it seems okay, it seems right, but no. Thom Hartmann has studied this quite well, and his data appear to be really quite good on that.
I'm sure it is.
So Oregon, Governor Brown signed a gun control law.
Yeah, I was pleased to see about that.
That was signed into law a bill that bars convicted domestic abusers and people under restraining orders from buying or owning guns and ammunition. I just think that's great. And that was the first gun bill that passed after the shooting in Florida.
But what we need is federal laws, because somebody from Oregon could go to another state. I imagine Idaho or Utah don't have those kinds of gun restrictions.
You are correct.
So that's the problem with not having a federal laws. They can just go to Idaho or Utah and buy a gun and come and shoot their wife or their girlfriend.
A lot of the NRA Republicans are saying that what you should have is a lax law, so you could take your gun wherever state you're in and have the same laws apply everywhere. So, you know, you can sounds crazy to me, but it is crazy. You know, as a result of the Parkland shooting on Valentine's Day of this year, the representative, I forgot what her name was, Tears, I think, in something like that, in Florida said, our hopes and prayers are all that we can do. You know, our hopes and prayers. And she said, oh, people may criticize me for saying hopes and prayers, but that's all we have. You buy that?
No. They always come out with that. Let's have a minute of silence.
Yes.
That's supposed to do it.
Yeah, remember the year
That brings them back to life, you know.
What? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the carnage is repaired, the organs can function, and someone who's been in the grave for 7 days can come out and do the jig. No, I know. It's absolutely ludicrous. Hopes and prayers. There was a wonderful line by Neil deGrasse Tyson who says, experts from all lines of life or something from all lines of work have conclusively proved that prayers and wishes do not stop bullets. That's pretty macabre, but yeah, prayers and wishes. Yeah, you had Rubio say that and Cruz say that. Remember 2 years ago you had a minute of silence? No, you had hours of silence. People and Democrats in the House sat on the floor protesting gun violence. And the Republicans were kind enough to switch the cameras off so it couldn't be broadcast. And then you had some people who used a video app on their phone to broadcast it. And then after that, the Republicans said, oh, no, if you do that again, we're going to really penalize you. I think it's like $10,000 an hour. Oh, geez. It's...
Are you hinting you don't like the Republicans very much?
I'm sorry, you told me I should be nice to them. I don't see many, Republican leaders. I think individual Republicans are fine. But the leader Republicans they're just going crazy. I mean, it's, for instance, all of them, the Obama's not born in the United States, climate change is a hoax, we don't care about health insurance. I mean, these things are cruel, you think?
Yeah.
Are you telling me you don't like Republicans, Stephan?
I don't like a lot of their policies.
Yeah, exactly correct. And
but I think they do have a point of view, which is smaller government, individual rights. There's a certain amount of logic there.
Yes.
And I think it's worthy of discussing those kinds of issues. And they have a point of view, and I think it needs to be not necessarily agreed with, but understood and kind of respected.
The David Koch brothers, one of the things that they're doing, one of the things Republicans are doing is dissolving government as much as they can, reducing cities, libraries, roads, and so on, too. Are you familiar with ALEC, American Legislative Exchange?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that ALEC has been doing carefully is making sure that states stop localities from offering Wi-Fi together. So you cannot, as a community, offer Wi-Fi. What? Yes, ALEC is also stopping people from selling energy back to the grid in Florida and a variety of other people, too. And, they just are interested in just making money, endless money, endless money. Remember Kennedy said at one point about greed, rich. When is enough enough? For billionaires and so on, there's not enough. There's no enough in the world that's enough for these guys. But the idea we're going to stop communities from getting together and offering a lower cost method of accessing the internet. Or we're going to make sure that libraries have a harder time and hopefully they'll go out of business and you can buy stuff from Amazon or, I guess my patience for, now at my age, again, I might as well say stuff. I don't know. But it sounds to me like you're not sure that the Republican solutions, any Republican solutions to this gun violence? None I've heard.
Well, there were some more liberal Republicans in the past. I think a lot of the Democrats are sort of in the position that moderate Republicans.
Like you're saying Manchin, for instance, yeah.
Well, yeah, Manchin is, but but he has to represent his state.
Yes.
I think of people like Rockefeller. Many years ago, Wendell Willkie ran against Roosevelt, and he was a decent Republican, moderate.
And Romney too, not the current Romney, but the father was a very moderate guy, and he said, I'm proud of all the taxes I pay, said George, and he said, and then his son says, oh no, I want to pay as few taxes as I can. You wouldn't elect me president if I paid more taxes.
Well, that's sort of the American way. Other countries like Chile, they like paying their taxes because they see it as contributing to the government. I don't like the fact that we spend so much money in this country on so-called defense.
Military, yes.
Yes, I don't like that.
Absolutely, and if you look at If you look at the polling and so on too, you'll see that most people in the United States really want to reduce military expenditures. They want to increase taxes on the rich. Oh, how'd that go with the tax bill that just went through? But they really do, 80%. They want to work on the climate. You know, they want to improve education. They want Social Security to be strengthened, Medicare, and so on too. But that's not what's happening. There's a do you remember research that Tom Hartman showed on Gillens and Page? You familiar with that? Gillens and Page research on Princeton, anyway, eastern part of the United States, showing that of the 80% of the bills that do something in the House, a movement in the House, 80% of the stuff that does something benefits the top 10%. Yeah. And there's really nothing that benefits the lower percent. It's noise. But if you can buy your senator or buy your representative like the Koch brothers can, Koch brothers say, hey, you can be with us or we're going to fund people against you. So what are you going to do? And, you know, so you have to say, oh, yeah, I'm with you. That's why the country, a major reason why the country doesn't work is, as you were saying earlier, money in politics. You know, absolutely agree with you.
So we're agreed about some of the measures for gun control.
Yep.
The banning the sale of AR-15s and similar. What about bump stocks?
Oh my God! Oh, let's have those. No, that I know. Absolutely correct. Yeah, absolutely. And also cop killer bullets and stuff. I mean, whatever. You know, I absolutely agree. Bump stocks. No one has really. I think there was one city in the United States in the South that banned bump stocks. That's it. I mean, gee whiz. You know, bump stocks not good. Let's go over this thing. Okay, so we have
AR-15s
and AK-47 and similar high.
Making it more difficult to buy a gun and restricting the number that a person can buy.
Right. Bullets in the chamber, in the magazine.
Yeah.
Background checks, waiting time. Yep.
Right.
One gun a month. Yep. No, I agree with. I mean, those are common sense things, and those are embraced by the majority of NRA members.
Yeah.
But the NRA and the Republicans aren't letting people, you know, come to that agreement, because I'm sure that they're all angels. No, they're not.
Do you know that the percentage of Americans that own guns has actually gone down?
Yeah.
But something like, what, 25% people own guns, but some of them own lots of guns.
Yes, the number has gone down. There was a number in. I forgot what it was. It's something like 75% of the guns in the United States are in several states like Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and so on.
The southern states.
They just love their guns. One of the Rodney King, remember the Rodney King thing?
Sure,
1992, I think it was 92, 98. At that time, the NRA sold guns for hunting and for target practice. But after that riot, then they started saying, oh, you have to protect yourself against African Americans. And then we have this, you know, the racist sort of thing, get your gun and stop the darkies from coming through the door. And they really switched it. This is such a happy note to end on. Hey, Stephan, you were just terrific.
Thank you. So, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, let's go back. The buyback, buyback AR-15, limited drums, background checks, waiting time, one gun at a time, bump stocks. Yeah, absolutely. Anything like that, get rid of them. You know, Teflon bullets. I mean, these are.
I think they're outlawed, haven't they?
No.
Because they're to kill cops to actually
Teflon,
go through.
Right, the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, hey, thanks for watching the Progressive Radio and TV. You are real good. I appreciate it. You also have the milk of human kindness for people of all political spectrums. So once again, we'll hopefully see you here next month, the first Tuesday of the month, talking about, well, we'll see, some progressive issue. What issues would you like to talk about? Climate sometime too?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And you said voting rights?
Yeah.
And I guess
gerrymandering, money in government.
Yes, money in government, yeah. And it all, unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to just money in government. Buying a politician is the best investment you can make. Because if so, then you can have, like the Koch brothers do, you can get billions of dollars for just a few $100,000. Makes you proud to be an American, doesn't it? We're the greatest of all possible countries.